So welcome guys to Creature Design with Black Mamba. Alright, Creatures Unlock. Right. So as we have spoken initially, I believe that you guys came in for you know to practice some creature design skills and to get to know how to kickstart your concepting skills in creature design. Alright. So a little bit of myself. I've already mentioned I'm from Taylor's University Lakeside Campus, lead specialist in animation. My name is Kanan Vijayan. I've got 14 years of experience in game art, animation, new media, concept art, and 3D production. Yep. So that's a little bit of me. Those who are here, my students, they should know me well. So those who are new, like Chris and all that, welcome and nice meeting you. All right. So as I mentioned previously, at the end of these 3-day sessions, you'll be able to demonstrate quick concepting of fantasy creature design by applying your basic understanding of subject matter study and forming a creature by combining, or practically, let me put it in a nutshell, having a hybrid creature. All right. So first and foremost, you need to know why sketching. Right. So most of the time that we always get this issues with mental or creative blockage, right? So what we have now is most of the time is we the problem is with our perfectionism. Most of the time that we intend to have all these beautiful creatures or concepts you know um, that is cool at the end, or it's like final output that we're looking for all the time, without realizing that we have this mental blockage and we are locking down ourselves most of the time in before we express or we try out or make a lot of mistakes to form a good design. So the objective is to cut that loose and make yourself to express as much as you can before you go ahead to create your final output. Make sense? Yeah. So all right. So as you can see, these are the samples of work that you can look at. I've already shared this in our classroom. You can get this slide from there straight away in our classroom. It's under the announcement. All right. So these are the samples that if you can sketch out quickly and then express. Of course, uh, when you're professional your lines are much more cleaner, but here I'm not going to judge you via professionalism straight away, but it's about learning how to express yourself. Okay, so that's our objective. All right, so moving on to any questions, guys. If you have, please do type in. All good? All right, so let me move on. You guys can still hear me, right? Yeah. All right, cool. So moving on to Chris is typing. Hello. Ah, stream. Okay. Okay, can see. All right, cool. So moving on to what we have now. All right. So what we have at the moment is, as I mentioned before, the objective is quickly flush out your ideas so that you get all your express you kind of like get varieties of designs before you finalize your work, right? Let loose yourself and make sure that you enjoy this creation of yours before you do your final polishing and so on and so forth. Okay, that is fairly important when you go to any of this industry. This whether it's going to be games or whether it's going to be um, whether it's going to be in animation industry or whatever not. So that is fairly important for you to first look at sketching and so on and so forth. Alright, so I will strongly recommend to my students to go ahead and do the sketchings, or when I was an art director during my game creation of practically my game gig, I always recommend my concept artists to flush out their sketching. I emphasize on this first. This is the first fundamental. Right, so moving on to second, the components of creature design. As you can see in the list, there are 6. Of course, there's more, plenty more. I am just nitpicking the 6 main components that you should always relate to. Alright, so as you can see, number 1 is creature design starts with real and existing animals or insects. So practically it needs to be familiar with the audiences or laymen when they look at your creatures, when they look at it, and they need to be able to relate to what are you trying to show, because without believability and without any um, familiarity with the creatures, the design is not going to convey as well as it's supposed to be. Alright, so you can see here, so that's what we intend to kind of get into our sketching as well as our creature design. Right, it needs to be relatable, needs to be presentable and appealing, and it's not just aesthetically beautiful, it needs to have its function. Right, so before you start your creature design or any concept, do not work blindly or be clueless. First and foremost, understand the purpose. Who's your target audiences? What's your demographics or psychographic that you're looking at? Understand that first before you go ahead and create your or start your sketching or any design in that matter. Right? So get a theme, get the title, understand the purpose before you start. Right, so this is practically you are starting by yourself. Number 3, learn how to interpret briefs. Say for instance, an example, the king beetle head shaman collects bones to form his spells. So that is a one line kind of brief to you as a concept artist or as a creature designer. I would give you this, for instance, your art director or your creative director is going to come and say, hey, look, this is what we need. I'm giving you this one line. You have to now break down the elements and create or start creating your creature design. Alright, so here as you can see, it's a king beetle head. So it can be a creature that is biped, or it can be quadruped and so on and so forth. You all know what is quadruped, biped? I believe that you guys know. So any questions you guys have, please note me after I've already explained or after I've already run through this short slide for you guys. Okay, so break down the key elements, like for instance, king beetle hit shaman. Shaman is where he's going to perform all this magical spells. He's very strong to spell casting any um, kind of magical fantasy kind of. He has this menacing look and so on and so forth, right? And he collects bones can be any type of bones, so he works well with bones for his spells to perform his magic spells and so on and so forth. So king and beetle head, so these are the elements, that is informations that you are going to extract and then make your mood board based on it and start your sketching. Alright, so that's that for learn how to interpret brief. Of course, from here definitely the brief is also going to cover who's your audiences, back to understanding your target audiences and the theme of your project and the purpose of it. Right, that's that for the learn how to interpret in a nutshell. Right, So moving on to number 4, reference is everything. So practically it's the key. So you need to create mood board. Mood boards is not just a collective of images or inspirations and stuff like that. You need to be able to extract then on the information for you to nitpick and start creating the design by itself. So here I'm emphasizing on design. So concept art is one. The design is about functionality. So you do not do any aesthetics just for a fine art purpose, but you're looking at how it functions for the project, how it gives value to the project. Make sense? So elements of extractions from the mood boarding. So for instance, if you're looking at a creature's head, types of heads, types of different types of heads, the crowns and so on and so forth, it can be you know uh, can be collected in a specific mood board for it by itself, or you can use the artboard. I will show you in the demo shortly, right? So number 5, moving on. So that's in nutshell. Number 5, make ample of mistakes early. Sketch out varieties of creatures before you make the final output really polished and so on and so forth. So at the very first beginning, that's why sketching is fairly important. You sketch out, be as loose as possible. Do not worry too much, because it's just going to stop you from moving on. Here, with a lot of mistakes, you will then find, hey, there's cool components from all these mistakes we can combine, and we can create a creature that is unique. Okay. And number 6, most importantly, you need to get feedback. So when you get feedbacks, you need to accept it in a very positive manner. And by me saying that accept it in a positive manner is for you to filter out what is a very good you know uh, feedback that is not so demotivating and so on and so forth. Sometimes it can be very harsh, but you have to first evaluate what is the feedbacks that each and every panels or whoever that you are showcasing your artwork, what do they need or what are they looking for. That's what you are trying to extract in a positive manner. So always be positive and do not be afraid. So if it's something that is going to personally attack you, let it be, it's fine. Of course you have to be careful with it. So sometimes if it's too much, you just walk away. No point of you to argue. It needs to be constructive feedback, so you need to understand from their perspective as a layman, what do they need from your concept, future concept. All right, so audience reaction is the key for you to have a successful design at the end of the day. Right? Does that make sense? So these are the key components, I would say. So more than that is there's a lot of other stuff that you can also add in, but let's just focus on the 6 elements first, the components, and after that we can move on. Okay, so the second is the fundamentals of drawing summarized. As you can see here, I have already have this collective of images put together. So here, as you can see, the reason why I'm showing all these images, or I collectively display all these images in this slide, is for you to first look at the core fundamentals that you can utilize in creating your creatures. Alright, so first and foremost, what I'm going to do is to show you, okay, number 1 is the hatchings. Alright, so all these lines and hatchings and so on and so forth, mostly it is used to create kind of like depth, or represent sort of like shadows and giving a little details on the form by itself. Alright, so depending what kind of hatching that you're looking at, so yep, that's on the hatching side. Okay, moving on, what we have is the perspective. That is practically hatching. So when you have a character design and so on and so forth, once you have already done the silhouettes and so on, or the line art, you have a little bit of sketching, hatching, sorry, to create this kind of like kind of like I would say shadow casting on the character to create this depth, to uplift it, to focus on certain components in your design. So as you can see here where my cursor is, so it is pointing at this a simple example, though it's not the best of the best, but normally in comics and all that they utilize this. So they use this simple hatching to show the line of direction as well as the depth that is creating via the lighting and so on and so forth. Okay, shadow casting. All right. So you have more than that is the perspective. Perspective is where you are looking at to create more depth. So practically it gives you sort of like the Z depth or a three-dimensional flow that eventually can be translated to 3D platforms and so on and so forth. So with this perspective utilization, you will see the character come more live, and it's more so of showing it is practically a character design that can run in a space, alright, with more more value, or the volume is well determined when you are drawing and so on and so forth, right? So moving on, you have then looking, you have this process of silhouetting. Silhouetting is the first key that you have to look at. So number one is a lot of artists will be required to do silhouette first. So silhouettes is where you be extremely loose with your drawing. So this is where you are saying, okay, it's like first impression, first readable information before you add in all the tiny minor details that you want to have in your character design. So from the silhouettes, the first big form is going to capture the attention of the audience's first look. And from then on, once it's interesting, then you can add components that is going to uplift the design by itself. Sense? Alright, so moving on to next is the action lines. The action lines is where it's going to show, normally it is on the C curve, S curves, and so on and so forth, right? The lines are extremely important so that it shows the form of direction, so the eye can, focus on the component or unique areas, right? So that's what it should be looking at, and the purpose of the action lines or line of action they call it, right? And as you can see on my right hand side, far right, is where you see postures and gestures. All right, so postures is where it's going to form, or it's going to show the initial character behavior. All right, so that is fairly important, whether it's the characters in the verge of attacking, whether it's going to strike at you in the midst of running, and so on and so forth, the personas that you are trying to create, right? So that's that on the fundamentals. You just have to look back at it, right? So these are my techniques for your extra tips, right? For you to get, a good design and so on and so forth at the end. So you can utilize this for any concepting in the future. So normally what I would do is, the first step is I will get a simple shape, big language, big forms, right? To see whether the silhouette, like for instance now it's a rock, perhaps you can look at character, means character, its anatomical, its stability, whether it's going to be presenting really well and so on and so forth. So once you have already start with the basic shape and get the silhouette, you then add lighting. Lighting is fairly important. So with lighting, then it highlights the component or the key areas to focus on, and shadow will definitely will uplift the character's positioning or where the character is standing, and gives a little bit more relatable or believable uh, kind of like round that you're in. All right, so thirdly is about overlaying textures, just to get what kind of materials that is attached to and so on and so forth. I overlay textures, And finally, it's about all this gradient overlay to give it more life by having all these trim lights and so on and so forth. So these are the key techniques that I normally, the basic techniques that I use to create a simple concept. Alright, so at the bottom here, it's a little explanation of compositing. So for instance, you have already finished a prop, for instance, or any sort of um, concept that you have with the environment involved or whatever not. So normally it's the arrangement of things in your composition or in your final concept. All right, you don't want it to be in straight lines, so it's like an oscillator. When it's very straight, when it's just muted or linear, it's practically stating there is no life in your drawing. So you want to have this upbeat a little bit, where you can have this peak of moments where it's dynamic and it's properly arranged in variety, so you don't get bored. It's like you're driving your car. If it's in straight line all the way, you're going to get bored. But when it has all these corners and so on and so forth, will keep you awake, more lively when you have elevations and so on and so forth. Make sense? So that's that what you are going to look at, and of course you can read this to get more clarities as well as more better understanding of how to use it or utilize it in the future. Alright, so here are sample of hybrid creatures that you can be produced. You're combining like the zebra or a chicken with sort of like um, other other reptiles that you combine and form this kind of creatures. So hybrid is normally what they will utilize, but of course the big component, like for instance here, as you can see, sort of first thing that you want to, when you look at this, it's relating to a giraffe, right? So kind of like when you see here, this is a giraffe, but then again it is much more stronger, where it looks like a hyena mixed with something else. But you can always relate and you can talk about what kind of creature it is, right? As you move on to others, like for instance you have this fish. Fish is the big component, one big subject matter that you focus on. Based on that, you add in other components, like for instance fish doesn't have hands, so hands can be all you use like chicken or any kind of reptiles or whatever not, animals that you mix and match, not too much overwhelming or taking away the essence of the creature, but you're adding in to create a unique creature. So those are the things that you are working on. Right? So that's that on the hybrid. So as you can see here, to begin with, you can always start out with the theme of the project again. The genre, so genre can be horrifying, or it's going to be comedy, it's going to be um, sci-fi and so on and so forth. What is it? What kind of genre that you're looking at? Serious, dramatic, and so on and so forth. And then you're looking at the location, where you say, hey, this is in the desert, or it's going to be in the mountainscapes or whatever not. The location matters because it then states what kind of features that you are intending to create that will suit the ecosystem. And character persona is where you're going to say whether it's going to be friendly, whether it's going to be angry and menacing most of the time, whether it's skeptical or whatever not, right? So that's a simple direction that you can take off, or you can do a checklist before you kickstart your creature design, right? So based on the brief, you are now to start to produce a hybrid fantasy creature set for a fantasy game that can be relatable and believable. Make sense? So this is where you are going to express yourself, and at the end of today, before we end the class by 11 or around 10:30, so 10:40 perhaps, right, we'll have a little flip session, just show, and I will give feedbacks if if not via live, you can have the feedbacks on our classroom. Okay, so that's that. And I've already given a sample of subject matters to choose, so you can either choose from here or you can move on to get your own samples. So for now, to kickstart off, you can refer to this, as well as to in our classroom. I've already attached in the classbook, right, the samples of references that you can pick from, right. So here I like this insects. I use insects a lot, so maybe I will have a theme where this insects is going to be in the temple ruins, where this guy is going to, be a boss that I'm going to fight at the end of my, level, each level, and so on and so forth. All right, so that's that on my side. All right, so you are now to take this and start drawing. Okay, so normally when I start, I will start with 1080p. Okay, so any questions, guys? Please type in. Hello, you guys are still there? All right, all good. I'm glad. All right, so I believe everyone is in line to the explanation that is given, and hopefully it is helpful. Right, so moving on is when I create, normally I'll work on landscape. So landscape is something that I always work on. It doesn't matter, but landscape is much more better, especially with 1080p. So 1080p, you can see, you just go here when you guys are using Photoshop, or if you're creating with any digital imaging tools like Krita or Sai or any other, or like for instance Sketchbook and so on and so forth. You will have this, to create a document you need to have a canvas. A canvas size should be at least 16 by 9, 1080p. So 1080p normally it's film size, so it's big. And the resolution for sketching, you can still, depending on how powerful the machine is, 72 is okay, but normally just go with 120. So with 120, then it will be much more, it will have all this clarities there. All right, so whenever you start or kickstart a creature design or any concepting, first and foremost you need to take care of your eyes. All right, so what I would do is I will offset my background. All right, so you guys are well versed with Photoshop? Yes, please type in. Yep, our students should be fine. All right, cool. So most of you are well versed with it. So I'm not going to go in depth with the technical side of how to use the software, but I'm going to show you steps of how to kickstart your work. All right, first and foremost, you have to open up your either your Pinterest. As you can see here, I have all this Pinterest board, or you can use any form of um, a reference or folders. Like for instance, I have here, I have a collective visual library here for me to always refer or get inspired with. So remember, it's an inspiration as well as a reference point for you to create your or enhance your visual libraries. So these are my collective, you know, uh, components that I have on my desktop. So I'm not too dependent on the cloud, because sometimes cloud can be a little iffy. But if not, you can just go to Pinterest or PureRef or Behance and so on and so forth. Okay, so I have my boards here in Pinterest. I use a lot of Pinterest. It totally depends on you guys. All right, so you guys can, you know always follow me in Pinterest. I've got about a lot of components or collective images here, or reference or visual libraries that you can nitpick, or maybe you can explore, yeah, if it's handy. Okay, I'm just going to click once, and you can see in my creature board. So this is where I collect all the references, so I can just see, hey, this is cool, I can utilize things and so on and so forth. Okay, so you can follow me if you want to. You can always look for Art Junction or Jingora, and you can, start following or collect any of these references for your future activities of design. Right. So here what I do is, it's not just about the creature. What I do is, whenever I have a board like this, is first and foremost I will extract information. For instance, if I'm looking at any of this inspired work, like for instance this tag people, right? So when I look at this concept, what do I see is, I will extract the elements, see how they combine and hybrid the creatures in order to create an appealing design. You know what I mean? So if it's gonna be a shaman sort of, or it's gonna be in any sort of creature persona that they're intending to create, we see how the anatomy is working or put together to make it, functionally moving, and you know get the persona right, like it's menacing and it's scary and so on and so forth, right? So I will extract information as such, rather than looking at the artwork and being awe upon it. You know what I mean? So uh, this is where you know you are building your observation skills. Make sense? Yes, who's typing? Guys can still hear me? All right. So whenever I see all this information or inspiration, first and foremost, you first get inspired and you're looking at it and getting like, hey, this is nice, this is beautiful, I wish I can do this. But you need to observe. I would strongly recommend you to enhance your observation skills, whereby you are first collecting all this information and building your visual library. Right? So that's my take on creating all this mood board, or keeping these boards with me to get me inspired. Right. So here I have a collection, like for instance, I'm looking at fish, and if I'm looking at insects, I like insects because I see a lot of beautiful stuff inside here. The form, the shapes, or all these beautiful things that is happening with the insects by itself. We can pick up the components that is very interesting and so on. So with this now, if let's say I were to create a dragon and so on and so forth, what I do is, first and foremost, in my concepting, before I start, I will just pick stuff and put it together. Okay, one is, you can go ahead and either create something like this, by having it grouped and so on and so forth. For demo purpose, I'll just use this, or you can just delete this first and create a brand new one with artboard on. Okay, 120 minimum. Right. So with artboard on, what can you do is, first you can have your inspiration collected. So for instance, if I like this character, I'll just drag and drop in my artboard. Right. So whichever that I'm looking at. So since Beetle is my subject matter that I'm going to extract information from, I'm going to just place it, right, for me to refer to. So bring in example, right. So say I have two components. You don't mix, like do not hybrid it up to 12 different insects or subject matters. So try to find the primary first, then you add on the secondary components which you are extracting from. So again, brief is extremely important, and you need to know what is the purpose of it. Okay, so here beetle, and then maybe the face. For the face I can have like faces and so on and so forth. Okay, what I'm trying to say, right? So different types of face. This is just for the face, right? So in as much as you can, or something that is relatable. Okay, an example. So if let's say you want to make another artboard, you all know how to use artboard. You can just duplicate this small, or delete all this. You get what I mean? So once you have this artboard ready, or if you don't want this artboard, you can just make do with what you have, or you can just drag this aside of your chart and start doing your drawings from here. You know what I mean? So with this now happening, normally what I'll do is I will, in this artboard, I can start drawing. Okay, first and foremost, create a layer. Okay, brush, you can be any form of brush. Here I'm just using a hexagonal brush. This is a brush that I commonly use, or it doesn't matter. So do not use effect brushes just yet, because remember this is more on creature design, so you don't want to have like cloud brushes and all that. So that one comes in later, but here you want to get these strokes right. So first and foremost, write your title, and we'll go for black, your title. Right, so this is kind of like what kind of direction is going to give, like fantasy what. All right, so fantasy, a shaman creature, or you can give a name, perhaps whatever name that is interesting, maybe shaman something. Right, and then of course at the bottom here you're going to write your name and the date. Right, something that is fairly presentable. Okay, and once you have already done that, number one thing is you let loose. So one, so say you have nothing in mind, you just get this brief example that is given. So it's a shaman, he collects he's a king shaman, so he collects bones. All right, so it's a beetle hit. So first and foremost, I want to get the emphasis of a king. All right, so what I'll do is I will let loose and start drawing this. All right, so normally what I'll do is either I can write down the components, or you can say, hey, where's the in location. Okay, maybe he's in a temple, he's a temple priest. Okay, and then location temple, maybe ruins, or ruins. Okay, so what kind of this, it will indicate the environment he's in, and from here it uses what, so there's a lot of bones, and he's not friendly, he's always mischievous, or for instance he has this mystery, right, sort of whatever mystery that is, right, and he's evil, even devilish, and so on and so forth. Okay, so you write down the key components in a very brief, so don't need to spend too much of time on that yet. So later you can filter, you can clarify things even further as you move on. Okay, an example. So copy this, blah blah blah, make it small, write it down. this is for your own note, right? So you can always refer to. And now you can start doing your designs. I'm going to off this title for a bit. So normally when I work, I'll just go really huge. If you're not used to silhouettes as such, right? Sometimes you find it, you may struggle, right? If you struggle with this, you can always do with simple lines and so on and so forth, right? So what you want to see is you want to give a first is for you to draw the platform, right? So this is where the character is going to sit, and always work with the teeth, right? So this is the T. So with this T, it will state whether the character is stable or not stable, right? So once you have already have that set, that it's going to be diagonally showing its dynamic form or whether it's going to be super flat, so that you define. Now once you have that guide, right? So you just draw, be as loose as possible. Here we are not, evaluating of how beautiful you're going to draw first. So this is an idea process first. So here I'm trying to capture how is he going to look and how it's going to work. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here, example. Okay. So if let's say I'm happy with this dude, right? So I like the posture first, right? Then I can move on to add in. I always use the grayscale to see what kind of component he carries. Bones, and you say bones, and he's shaman. So beetle head, what sort of beetles that I'm looking at? Beetles normally and since I pick components from here and I add in like the horns, the beetle horns. Can you see? And he has multiple hands or limbs, right? So one is a prominent one that is going to make move or to help move the character around, sort of. And I'm creating this kind of vibe of he's dynamically strong as well as I don't know, it's interesting. So this is how I start, right? I'll just keep it loose, don't want to pressure too much. So this is the eye and so on, example, right? So once you have this in mind, what you do is you make it small. Okay, so I've got one option done. So next is maybe a different set of body. So for instance, I'm going to look at maybe he's a fat dude instead. So he's been eating. You create this kind of narratives as you move on. So he's always fat. He's sitting on his throne most of the time, and he has this tiny little head, for instance. So it's very sharp. He has these tentacles that is popping up. You can erase few things if you want to, right? And he has this, he's always holding a staff. This staff is where he's going to, cast sort of like spell out of it and so on and so forth. A simple one, right? So he has a platform, he's going to sit or he's just going to stand and so on and so forth. So if you intend to have it wrong, you can always erase and get few components in, right? Or rearrange your components to make it more fun. So if he's holding if he's wearing this cape sort of, so you can just start drawing that. Pick some colors, right? Always play with negative space, right? So he's gonna hold this and he's gonna wear this big crown, example. Stand majestically in his throne or his settings or his location. I'm going to rotate this wherever I want, or I'm going to place it to a fairly okay presentable areas. So when you're giving feedbacks, you can get a proper, or you get room for you to just scribble things and turn out the ideas, right? So one way is getting the big blocks, big shapes, all right? So another way is number 3, is for you to draw as loose as possible. So I pick the key component, like for instance I focus on the beetle head, right? So beetle head, again, we strongly emphasize if the creative brief is going to be beetle head shaman. The shaman is always, um, be very cynical, right? Very sinister sort of feel. I'm just going to draw as fast as possible. I'm not going to focus on how beautiful it is. Do not do this. Okay, please avoid doing this. So you go like, loosen your hand, and when you draw, do not, press your palm to the digital, your Wacom tablets or drawing tablets too much, because end of the day you might have this carpal tunnel forming in your hand, and eventually going to spoil your health. Okay, so here I'm just going to go loose, getting some shapes, right, giving some landmarks, and maybe I'm going to have this big crown, like an alien crown for instance, right? Example, and start drawing the character who's pushing in. You can see, so big legs, long, big dynamic legs, depending, right? So maybe you want to have like big, fat belly, for instance. Anatomically, later you come and adjust. So for instance, very thin and thin hand. He's fat, so he's a bit more roundish and so on and so forth. And he carries this. So once you have already done this, so for instance, be loose, okay? Again, you go back to brush, make it slightly bigger, and fill in the colors. This is another way of sketching. So depending, whichever that you are comfortable, because end of the day, it's about you to form this output and bringing out the best out of its narration and so on and so forth. See? So if it's stable, if it's not stable, then you're going to go ahead and you're going to stabilize it and so on and so forth. But do not waste your time too much. Just go as free as possible. If it's going to have like two legs, it's going to move with two legs for the pets and so on and so forth. How does it move? So if it's wrong, it's okay. Again, it's not about perfectionism just yet. Remember, that is the creative block, and it's going to cost you time, or it's going to be time consuming. I'm just going to just vaguely draw and throw things around and to see what interesting creatures that I can create. So you get the idea. So once you finish this, right, you've got another way of doing is also always remember your skeletal skeletons are important, right? Your skeletal drawings. So skeletal drawings is another one that you can always look at. So if it's a human being, you have this cage, right? So you guys have done, like, Chris has done sculpture, right? So you get to have this bone or skeleton first before you cover it with, um, you know, some other, the mass by itself. Okay, get what I mean? So you want to get this first, a rough idea, and eventually you fill in the blanks by making sure it is anatomically correct and so on and so forth. You can do this as well, right? So there's a couple of ways. There is no, specific way of creating or kickstarting of your characters. Make sense? So will be your landmarks, and if you're happy with this, you can just go ahead and start coloring. Maybe about 60% color it to fill in the blanks to get the first look of something that is going to fix that, to help you to identify what other components need to be adjusted and make it beautiful. See that? Okay. So what you guys can do is you can start doing a little sketches. So say about 10 different types of creature, or pick one, say King Shaman, right? Shaman, Beetlehead, and he collects bone, so he's very mystical. So, and he has this, he casts spell. Okay, so King Shaman, Beetlehead, mystical, casts spell, and the other personage you can add. You can make him friendly, you can make him menacing, and so on and so forth. So this is practically how I kickstart. Okay, is it too fast? Please type in, guys. Hello, you guys are there? All good. Okay. So please try it out, and I want to see how you kickstart this. Once you have already kickstarted this, what I'll do is I'll show you how to get an ambience first. Then what we can do is at the end of today, right? I'll leave you to practice first. Take your time. End of today, you submit this, and I will give you a feedback. Enough? So before you end or finish this in a session, you must post what you have drawn. Say about, I'll give you around up to 10:45. Is that fine? So you can just try it out and post it here. Okay? Okay? For now, to kickstart. How to fix the laggy part when you draw. What do you mean? Laggy part. So in here, please be the brush. Okay. Normally it is because either your RAM is not working well, or your GPU has an issue, right? Your graphic card, or the version of Photoshop that you are working on. See, sometimes it takes up a lot of memories, as well as when you're doing streaming. So what you do is, commonly you go to edit, you go to purge, make sure that you purge all the time, and do this cleaning. If you have CC cleaner, clean it up all the time. Make sense? Yeah. So yeah, that's how you work on it. Lagging, you can go to performance, you can go to preferences, or performance here. Increase the range, right, of how much of memories you're going to use. Of course, if you have, like, if it's RTX version, or oh yeah, yeah, we are doing the King Shaman beta. Yes. So if you're going to use the processor, you can hit on the processor is on, depending on what powerful it is, how powerful it is. For advanced or basic, I'll just leave it as basic for now, right? So increase this memory usage, because all this is catch files, all your histories is coming in. Yeah. So say okay, and you're good to go. So while you guys are practicing, please make sure, when you're practicing, name your layers. Yeah. So name it properly. Naming convention is important for you to look at. So that's that. Apart from that is, yeah. whilst you're doing your practice, I'm going to try to fix my audio, my speaker. Okay, can? So I leave you to practice first. Right? I'm going to mute myself for a bit. If you need anything, please type in for now. So once I fix this, then probably I'll get back to you. Right? So happy sketching. Are you guys talking? Hello? 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 Can you hear me, guys? Yes. Try talking. Yes. Vanessa, I still can't hear you. Okay. Why? It's a bit weird. Hello.